For centuries, Rome was not simply a city. It was power itself. Its legions marched across continents. Its roads tied nations together. Its laws outlived kings. Its emperors ruled from the Atlantic Ocean to the deserts of Syria, from the forests of Britain to the rich grain fields of Egypt. To many people living inside its borders, Rome did not look like one empire among many. It looked like the center of the world. It looked eternal, invincible, unbreakable. And that is exactly why its collapse became one of the greatest shocks in human history. Because empires rarely die in a single dramatic moment. They weaken slowly. They decay invisibly. Then one day the illusion breaks and everyone realizes the giant has already fallen. The story of Rome's final days is not the story of one invasion, one corrupt emperor, or one lost battle. It is the story of how the greatest machine of the ancient world slowly lost the ability to hold itself together. And in the end, the empire that once conquered nations could barely defend its own heartland. Before we continue, if you enjoy powerful history told like this, real stories, real stakes, cinematic detail, subscribe to Empire Never Sleeps. Every new episode takes days of work, and your support helps build more documentaries on the rise and fall of empires, wars that changed the world, and the men who believed they could rule forever. Now, to understand how Rome fell, you first need to understand what Rome had become. By the 4th and 5th centuries, the Roman Empire was still massive, still wealthy in some provinces, still feared by enemies, still magnificent in architecture, ceremony, and prestige. But beneath the marble surface, deep fractures had already formed. The empire had split into two halves. The Eastern Roman Empire, ruled from Constantinople, was richer, more urban, more defensible, and better administered. The Western Roman Empire, ruled first from Milan and later Ravenna, was weaker, poorer, and increasingly unstable. The old city of Rome still held symbolic power, but real control had moved elsewhere. Cities in the West shrank, trade slowed, tax revenues dropped, border defenses became harder to maintain. Political stability nearly vanished. Emperors rose and fell with stunning speed. Some ruled for years, some for months. Some never truly ruled at all. Behind many thrones stood generals, palace officials, court factions, and ambitious men who understood a brutal truth. In a declining empire, the crown becomes easier to seize and harder to keep. Rome still wore imperial robes, but the body underneath was aging fast. For centuries, the Roman army had been the most disciplined military force on earth. It conquered Carthage, crushed Greek kingdoms, defeated Gauls, marched into Judea, Germania, Dacia, and Britain. Roman soldiers built roads, forts, bridges, walls, and empire itself. But by the final centuries, the old military system was changing. Recruiting enough loyal soldiers became harder. Population losses from war, plague, and economic decline reduced manpower. Heavy taxation drove peasants off land. Some regions simply could not supply men the way they once had. So Rome turned increasingly to foreign troops. Germanic federates, mercenaries, allied tribes settled inside imperial lands in exchange for military service. Many fought bravely, many served loyally. But something fundamental had changed. Rome increasingly depended on men who were not Roman in identity, not Roman in tradition, and not always Roman in loyalty. Even worse, these men learned Rome's strengths and weaknesses from the inside. While internal weakness grew, pressure from beyond the borders intensified. For centuries, tribes beyond Roman frontiers had raided, traded, negotiated, and occasionally fought Rome. But now, migration became something larger. A chain reaction began in the late 4th century when the Huns burst into Europe from the east. Fast horsemen, ruthless fighters, a terrifying new force that pushed entire peoples westward. Goths, Vandals, Alans, Suebi, and others began moving toward Roman territory. Some came to raid, some came to settle, some came simply to survive. In 376 AD, the Visigoths asked permission to cross the Danube into Roman lands. They were fleeing the Huns. Rome agreed to admit them. On paper, it seemed manageable. Rome had settled outsiders before. But corruption poisoned everything. Roman officials exploited the refugees, food was overpriced, families were abused. Starving Goths reportedly traded children into slavery for meat. Desperation turned into fury. 2 years later came the Battle of Adrianople. Emperor Valens marched east to defeat the Goths before reinforcements arrived. He wanted glory. He found catastrophe. Roman forces were surrounded and destroyed. Thousands of elite soldiers died. Emperor Valens was killed. The battlefield burned with shattered Roman prestige. It was one of the worst defeats in imperial history. For the first time in generations, the world saw that barbarian armies could annihilate Roman armies in open battle. Rome survived Adrianople, but survival is not the same as recovery. After that, Rome increasingly negotiated with enemies it once commanded. More tribes were settled inside the empire. More autonomy was granted. More compromises were made. Every short-term solution created long-term danger. Then came a moment that symbolized the unraveling of the western frontier. On the last day of 406 AD, the Rhine frontier collapsed. Whether by frozen river crossings, weakened defenses, or sheer chaos, massive groups of Vandals, Alans, and Suebi crossed into Gaul. Once, the Rhine had been a guarded imperial line. Now it failed. Roman towns burned, villas were looted, farms were destroyed. Refugees fled across roads built by Rome itself. Gaul, one of the richest provinces in the west, began slipping from imperial control. And while enemies crossed borders, Rome was again fighting itself. Rival claimants declared themselves emperor. Generals raised private armies. Civil wars consumed troops desperately needed elsewhere. Imagine an empire attacked from outside while tearing itself apart inside. That was late Rome. Then came the event that stunned the ancient world. The sack of Rome in 410 AD. For nearly 8 centuries, the city of Rome had not fallen to a foreign enemy. Even when emperors ruled from other capitals, Rome remained sacred in the Roman imagination. It was the city of Caesar, Augustus, Trajan, and the Senate. It was monuments, triumphs, memory, prestige. Then Alaric, king of the Visigoths, marched on the city. Negotiations failed, defenses were weak. On August 24th, the gates were opened. Rome was sacked. For 3 days, soldiers looted wealth, terrorized citizens, and shattered the illusion of invulnerability. Though parts of the city survived and some churches were spared, the psychological damage was immense. St. Jerome, hearing the news far away, wrote in grief that the city which had conquered the world had itself been conquered. The impossible had happened. Rome could be touched. Rome could bleed. Rome could be humiliated. Yet even then, the empire did not instantly disappear. This is what makes Rome's fall so misunderstood. Collapse is rarely cinematic in real time. It is administrative, gradual, confusing. After 410, emperors still ruled. Laws were still issued, taxes were still collected, coins were still minted. Governors still governed where they could. But the machine was weakening province by province. Britain was effectively abandoned. Roman troops withdrew. Towns and local leaders were left to survive alone. In Spain, competing powers carved territory. In Gaul, Roman control became fragmented. And in North Africa, the greatest strategic disaster of the century approached. North Africa was not just another province. It was one of the wealthiest regions in the Western Empire. It supplied grain. It supplied taxes. It linked trade across the Mediterranean. Lose Africa, and the West would lose both food and money. In 429 AD, the Vandals crossed into North Africa under their king, Genseric. He was intelligent, ruthless, and politically gifted. Within years, they seized Carthage, one of the great cities of the Roman world. The West lost a vital economic engine. Grain routes were threatened, revenue collapsed, naval weakness deepened. Imagine an already wounded empire losing one of its strongest arms. That was the Vandal conquest. As imperial institutions weakened, survival depended more and more on extraordinary individuals. One was Stilicho, a brilliant general of mixed Roman and Vandal background. For years, he held together the Western Empire through military skill and political maneuvering. Then court rivals convinced Emperor Honorius to execute him. One of the few men capable of defending the West was destroyed by the West itself. Later came Flavius Aetius, another remarkable commander. Diplomat, strategist, survivor, he managed alliances, contained enemies, and preserved fragments of Roman authority through sheer competence. When Attila the Hun threatened Gaul in 451, Aetius assembled a coalition of Romans and Visigoths to face him at the Battle of the Catalaunian Plains. Attila withdrew. One of history's most feared conquerors had been checked, but even victory revealed decline. Rome could no longer defend itself alone. It required barbarian allies to stop barbarian threats. Soon after, Emperor Valentinian III personally murdered Aetius in a palace confrontation. According to later accounts, a courtier told the emperor that he had cut off his right hand with his left. Once again, the empire destroyed its own protector. Months later, Valentinian himself was assassinated. Leadership became chaos. Puppet emperors rose and fell. Men were crowned, discarded, replaced. Some lasted weeks. Some were remembered only because coins carried their names. Then in 455 AD, Rome was sacked again, this time by the Vandals. They looted extensively and carried treasure away by sea. 2 sacks of Rome within 45 years. The old aura of imperial supremacy was gone. Meanwhile, provinces continued slipping away. Gaul fractured into competing kingdoms. Spain divided among powers. Africa remained lost. Britain was gone. Italy itself depended increasingly on Germanic military commanders. Roman emperors became ceremonial masks. Real power belonged to whoever controlled troops. By the 470s, the Western Roman Empire was little more than Italy and scraps of legitimacy. Then came the final act. One of the last emperors was a boy named Romulus Augustulus. Even his name felt symbolic. Romulus, legendary founder of Rome; Augustulus, little Augustus, a child wearing the echoes of greatness. He was placed on the throne in 475 by his father Orestes, a military commander. But another commander soon rose against them, Odoacer, leader of Federate troops in Italy. His soldiers demanded land payments. When refused, they revolted. Orestes was captured and executed. Odoacer marched on Ravenna, the western capital. On September 4th, 476 AD, Romulus Augustulus was deposed. There was no final legion charging into death, no burning palace, no emperor making a last speech from the walls. The boy was spared and quietly sent into exile with a pension. That was the official end of the Western Roman Empire. Odoacer did not proclaim himself emperor. Instead, he sent the imperial insignia east to Constantinople, signaling that one emperor in the east was enough. He ruled Italy as king. Roman offices continued in altered form. Life went on. Which is why many ordinary people living through it may not have realized they had just witnessed one of history's most famous endings. Markets still opened, bread was still sold, taxes were still demanded, priests still preached, children still played in streets. Yet the state that had ruled the Western Mediterranean for centuries was gone. So why did Rome really fall? Not because of one invasion, not because of one weak emperor, not because luxury made Romans soft. Those simple answers are satisfying but incomplete. Rome fell because multiple crises fed each other for generations. Political instability produced civil war. Civil war drained armies and money. Economic decline weakened recruitment. Heavy taxes crushed productivity. Population decline reduced manpower. Weak armies required foreign soldiers. Foreign soldiers gained leverage. Lost provinces reduced tax revenue. Reduced revenue meant weaker defenses. Weaker defenses meant more lost provinces. Every problem intensified the next. Then came external shocks. Migrations, invasions, Huns, crop failures, plagues, piracy, broken trade networks. Rome did not collapse because one wall broke. It collapsed because every pillar cracked at once. Yet Rome also did not truly die. That is the paradox. The Eastern Roman Empire survived nearly another 1,000 years. Its people still called themselves Romans. Roman law endured. Roman roads remained in use. Latin evolved into new languages spoken by hundreds of millions today. Christian institutions absorbed Roman structure. Kings across Europe copied Roman titles and symbols. The Holy Roman Empire later claimed Roman inheritance. Napoleon borrowed Roman imagery. Modern republics borrowed Roman Senate language, architecture, and political vocabulary. Rome lost territory, but conquered time. Look around the modern world and Rome is everywhere. Arches, domes, eagles, senates, civil law systems, military organization, urban planning. Even the idea that a state can unite vast peoples under common rules owes much to Rome. The empire ended, its shadow did not. And perhaps the greatest lesson of Rome's fall is this: power often appears permanent right before it isn't. Generations of Romans were born into a world where Roman rule felt natural, inevitable, almost like weather. Roads were Roman, taxes were Roman, coins were Roman, borders were Roman. Then slowly, generation by generation, things stopped working. Frontiers became dangerous, officials became corrupt, armies became unreliable, trust eroded, confidence faded. When belief in permanence dies, decline accelerates. That is why Rome remains relevant now. Not because we fear barbarian tribes crossing rivers, but because the mechanics of decline are timeless. Political paralysis, elite infighting, overextended borders, economic strain, dependence on hired force, loss of civic identity, systems too large to reform and too weak to continue unchanged. These are not Roman problems. They are human problems. Imagine standing in Italy in 476. You wake up, buy bread, complain about taxes, hear gossip in the market. Somewhere, a child emperor has been removed. A new ruler now commands soldiers. But your daily life continues. Most collapses feel ordinary while they happen. Only later do historians place dates on endings. And perhaps that is the most haunting truth of all. The Western Roman Empire did not end in thunder. It ended in exhaustion. Not with one final scream, but with a long sigh. Yet Rome's memory became louder than its armies ever were. Its ruins inspired awe. Its laws shaped continents. Its language survived in millions of mouths. Its symbols still project authority. Its mistakes became warnings studied by every serious state that came after. The Western Roman Empire fell. Rome did not. And maybe that is why 15 centuries later, the question still grips us. How could something so powerful collapse? Because all power collapses eventually. The only mystery is whether those inside can see it happening before it is too late.